Order. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge that we are holding this meeting on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and Musqueam Nation. We recognize and respect them as nations in this territory, as well as their historic connection to the lands and waters around us since time immemorial. I would also like to announce that there's a big celebration coming up on Sunday. The West Van United Church is 100 years old. And everyone is invited to the service at 10 a.m. on the 17th to actually attend the service, but also to join in the celebration of recognizing one of our most high-profile and active churches in the community with a very large group of parishioners. So congratulations from Council, on behalf of Council, to the ministry, and hopefully we'll see you at the celebration on Sunday. So I would ask whether there's any urgent business to, actually no, I would ask the corporate officer first to go through the fire drill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the benefit of everyone in attendance, as some of you will likely have noticed, this building is currently under construction. So in the unlikely event that we do need to evacuate, I'm just going to point out the following 3 exits. 2 of them, if you just proceed down the hall and into the main atrium, you can either go down and out onto 16th Street or out onto 17th Street. Alternatively, behind Councillors Wong and Soprovich, if you see this Running Man sign with an arrow, there is a door just directly behind there that opens out into the parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so I would ask whether there's any urgent business to add to the agenda. Seeing none, I would ask Councillor Soprovich for a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the November 4, 2019 regular council meeting agenda be amended by adding to item 6 the written submissions C2 to C7 regarding reconsideration of the environmental development permit application 19-056 for 993 Sinclair Street, adding item 7.1 regarding 1195 12th Street Rush House strata plan approval, adding item 8.1 regarding proposed heritage revitalization agreement bylaw number 5026-2019 and heritage designation bylaw number 5027-2019, 3321 Radcliffe Avenue, the Hewitt House, and adding item 8.2 regarding proposed council procedure bylaw number 5005-2019 and council committee procedure bylaw number 5020-2019, and by adding item 8.3 regarding proposed official community plan number 4985-2018, amendment bylaw number 5008-2019, zoning bylaw number 4662-2010, amendment bylaw number 5009-2019, housing agreement authorization bylaw number 5010-2019, development permit 8-123, amendment to development permit 12-084, Amica Lionsgate Maison Senior Living, and that the agenda be approved as amended.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. There are no minutes to adopt, so I will just remind the public that if you wish to speak to an agenda item for a 3-minute maximum period, please sign up at the speakers list, which is in the corner. Speak clearly into the microphone so that everyone can hear your comments, including those who depend on assisted listening devices, and provide your name and whether you are a West Vancouver resident if you wish to do so. So the next item is a delegation from the Dutch Liberation Canadian Society regarding Thank You Canada 2020 celebrations. And I've got my pin on tonight. We all do. Or no,
that gave me a good start. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I hope it all will work. But I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity, your worship and council members, to let me speak to you. thank you for our association to make this presentation, to share with you the 75th commemorative European Liberation Program we are working to implement from May to July 2020 throughout British Columbia. My name is Erik van der Ven. I'm Vice President of the Dutch Liberation. Unfortunate, Audrey Zijlmans, who is the President and who is normally reading all this, is not able to come. I was normally only in charge of doing the click here, and I forgot that.
You've been promoted.
Okay, yes, thank you. So and there are some tongue twisters for me in this letter, so hopefully you will forgive me for that. On August the 31st, 2018, our non-profit society was formed with representatives from various Dutch organizations in the Lower Mainland and with the BC Yukon Command of the Royal Canadian Legion. Our mission is to thank and to honor Canada and its veterans, including soldiers, sailors, airmen, nurses, military personnel, for the contributions to end World War II in Europe. We once more would like to say, thank you, Canada. We have created a wide range of events and activities to accomplish our mission for 2020. First of all, we like to honor our fallen soldiers on May the 2nd, 2020 at 8:45 at over 40 locations in BC. We will be hosting a commemorative candlelight virgin with those little things at the city cenotaphs or in the city cemeteries. We invite West Vancouver families and you worship and council to attend a virgin in your area. We are hoping that the Legion Command number 60, which is here located, also will sign up to join us in this event. This slide represents a sample of posters we will be distributing to inform Canadian families of the candlelight vigils around the province. We hope that your local command number 60 will join us in this event. Secondly, we are focusing on the presentation of an education program to the youth. Our society has been supported by the BC Agriculture and the Classroom Foundation and developed an education package. It is a big booklet with whatever they could do in the schools, for teachers about the liberation of Europe in 1945. We have reached more than 1,400 elementary schools. To enrich the education program, the society is contributing a box of red liberating boxes, tulps, like this, but we only send them 75 instead of 10, to participate to the elementary schools. Each school will receive the box, what I just mentioned, and 2 online lesson plans for social studies programs at secondary schools will be available in the fall as well, so that's not on here. We have also a wide range of books about the Second World War on our library, and you are more than welcome to go to our website to see the titles. We are promoting our commemorative liberation program to several cities in BC and beyond. We invite the District of West Vancouver to join us in celebration this Thank You to Canada with a participation request. At our candlelight vigils, we would like Canadian families to place a supplied little candle, which we will supply. We ordered about 10,000 of them, so at the cenotaph or at the soldier's grave place, and we supply fresh flowers. You will get at least 300 flowers at each site in vases and 2 wreaths available for presentations at the vigil. To participate in our tulip promotional program, we invite cities, gardeners, landscapers, and businesses to purchase tulip bulbs for planting in the neighborhood. along streets, boulevards, and parks. Tulps can still be purchased through our website and also at your local garden center, or maybe even at the Legion. Therefore, we invite everybody to help decorate your town red with the Liberator tulp. I was able to communicate about the tulp program with your Parks Board, Mr. Dan Hennigan, who promised me to buy 1,000 bulbs for planting in your city. But we have not seen the order yet, so that's why I just wanted to bring it up.
Okay.
Finally, we would like to share with you that in the Netherlands there are 3 Canadian war cemeteries where 2,700 Canadian soldiers are buried. Bergen-op-Zoom, Holten, and Groesbeek. This slide shows the headstone of a fallen soldier at Bergen-op-Zoom cemetery. Now, why is that important? Well, there is an organization in the Netherlands which is called Faces to Graves, who is seeking the assistance of Canadian families from across Canada to help them obtain a photograph or a fallen soldier and to write a story about each in order to build a virtual memorial digital file. Canadian families are invited to write a story and send a photograph of the loved ones buried in the Netherlands to the Faces of Graves. Visit the website at facestograves.nl. Yeah? We're going one more. As you may be aware, on April the 14th, 2019, Canada's parliament approved a private members bill and introduced Dutch Heritage Day to be celebrated annually on May the 5th to acknowledge the contributions of the Dutch Canadians who have made it to Canada. In the Netherlands, the 4th of May is Memorial Day, for you to know. And on the 5th, they celebrate the liberation. That's why the 5th is an important day. Finally, on July the 4th, we are planning to host a special celebration, and later information will be followed by the Consul General of the Netherlands. In closing, we invite you worship and council members and the West Vancouver families to participate in our commemorative event in 2020, to communicate to teachers and schools our educational initiatives, and to encourage Canadian families to support the efforts of Faces to Graves in the Netherlands. We are leaving you with our presentation folder. I think you have all received that, which provides some additional information about the efforts of our association. I would like to leave you with one quiet quote from our Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte when he spoke in your parliament in Ottawa earlier this year. He said, "Canada and the Netherlands will be forever connected because we, as Dutch, have to look after your children who are buried in our country." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. van der Ven.
Perfect.
Council, did you have any questions or comments? Councillor Soprovich?
Madam Mayor, sir, thank you for that. I had a friend who went back with a group to the Netherlands a few years ago, and the response to the Canadian soldiers was just incredible from that country. They just were so delighted at the time that the liberation took place, but that many years later, they still had not forgotten what the Canadian soldiers did for them.
It's true.
So it was really a marvelous story. That many years later, it's still true today.
If you as Canadian go to Holland and you mention that you are Canadian, the world will be open, you will be invited, you will be treated like kings, okay? Or queens.
Thank you. I also want to acknowledge how I think this relationship between the Netherlands and Canada has been maintained for 75 years, and I do credit the actions of the Dutch people. One can only imagine the joy and gratitude of the Dutch people when they were liberated by Canadian soldiers. I know they were starving. They were eating tulips, actually, to sustain themselves. And from the very beginning, they promised never to forget Canada. And I was fortunate enough to attend a ceremony a couple of years ago where we planted tulips with the delegation from the Netherlands at Memorial Garden in our park, across from our library, right by our cenotaph.
Right.
So we really appreciate this 75-year relationship and the recognition by the Dutch people of Canadian contribution. I think your words are very touching about looking after our children, because many of these, mainly boys, were very young. And I also want to just express the gratitude of the tulips and sending the tulips and that remembrance that we can have for this unfortunate period in our history. So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
All right, so with that, I'll get a motion from Councillor Lambert.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm very pleased to recommend that the delegation from the Dutch Liberation Canadian Society regarding the Thank You Canada 2020 celebrations be received for information with our thanks.
All in favor? Thank you very much, Mr. Van der Ven. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And we'll move to item number 5, which is a presentation by the Legion. And we have Mr. Morton here and Mr. Cochran. Mr. Morton, President of the Legion.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for inviting me this evening. I think this is my 4th year. You'd imagine I'd be used to this now, but I'm not. I'd like to go a little bit away from my normal speech at this time of year, and I'd like to tell you the state of, not the Union, but the Legion. In 1926, the district, or whatever it was at the time, gave us the land that we're presently on. That was 26 years ago. Or sorry, 1926. Since then, we've had approximately 40 presidents, some of them numerous times, that has gotten us to this stage. At one time, we had as many as 1,500 members. We now, as of today, have 397. Legions are dwindling. I was at a convention a couple of weeks ago. There are 247 legions in BC, and 24 of them are in trusteeship, which means the next step is they close. Our building is a tired old building now, like a lot of our members, and needs some help. And we're presently in the process of trying to make a decision whether we develop our property or fix what we have. The development, we've done our due diligence and spoken to many, many developers and had some help from council. And we haven't had a vote yet from the membership, but we have so many restrictions there that it probably will end up fixing what we have. And I want to tell you some of the good things that's happened in this area for the last little while. 2 years ago, the district approached me to see if we would be appreciative or would allow the children in the schools to make the white crosses that we put up, which was yesterday. And as it turned out, at the time, we needed some repaired. West Van High at the time, Ben Schotten was the woodworking teacher there at the time. The kids made 1,500 new crosses in their woodwork shop over the course of 6 months. I asked, I believe the lady's name is Corinne, who's head of the Parks Board, if it would be okay for me to approach the school and see if they would like to put them in the ground, because they're always put in the ground the Sunday before Remembrance Day. Because Sunday happened to be the day before this year, it was yesterday. and she had no problem with that, so we approached West Van High last year, and 22 kids showed up. It was pouring rain and it was cold, and all the crosses were laid out by the employees because they know where the veterans' graves are. And every kid brought a hammer, and there was some blue thumbs by the time they left, but they put 1,213 crosses into the ground. This year, Rockridge approached us to see if they would like to get involved because the word went around, and on Friday just past, we had 12 young men and women from West Van High, and I believe it was 10 from Rockridge that came and put 1,213 more crosses in the ground, and we had donuts and all the usual junk food that, you know, we eat afterwards. So I would like to publicly acknowledge the staff of the graveyard and the Parks Board. I don't remember all of the names, so I wouldn't want to start naming some in case I forget some, but I know Robert up at the, Roberta in the office, Corinne, who oversees all of that stuff. Kudos to them. On a sidebar, about 6 months ago, we were approached at our Legion to buy a Vimy Ridge map, which is 16 by 20 feet, with all of the hills and the ditches on the map. The PAC had raised only part of the money, and they needed the remainder. They approached us, and we were more than happy to do that. Tomorrow morning at 8:30, the map is going to be put on the gym floor, and I will be there to see what's happening to it. We're very fortunate that we have a gentleman in our branch whose father was at Vimy Ridge and was very, astute, I guess. He kept a diary every day while he was in Vimy. And he was a runner, and what runners, their job was to run from ditch to ditch and tell the people what was happening. Every day he wrote into his diary. I'm fortunate to have a copy of that diary with pictures, and we're going to give it to Rockridge in the morning with the map that we helped to buy. So I want to thank the school board for all the help that they've given us, because the future of the Legions are not with the kids, but we're not encouraging people to drink. We have a bar, but we also, our mission statement is to look after veterans and their families. And I'm sure a lot of the kids that were there on Sunday probably have grandfathers that may be in the ground up there. We don't know. But one of the things that we're going to do next year, we're hoping, because we now have crosses probably for the next 3 or 4 years, is to adopt a grave. And we're hoping that some of the kids that get involved to adopt a grave, find out who's in there, and write an essay on that man or woman that's in there. It's been done in Nova Scotia very successfully. So again, I want to thank Council for having us, and I want to thank Council for the assistance you gave us last year on our tax. We pay our bills every month, but that's about all we do. The money that we raise in Poppy, we cannot touch. It's public money in trust. Last year, we raised $86,000 on Poppy campaign in a municipality that has apparently about 42,000. Our goal this year is 100,000. As of tonight, we're halfway there with a week to go. Finally, I want to thank this year, for the first time, I believe, our MC is a council member. Marcus Wong, thank you so much for taking the job. You asked me, and I was more than happy to do it. So I now ask Steve Cochran, who's a Royal Air Force veteran, to do the act of remembrance.
Madam Mayor, members of council. Madam Mayor, members of council, Comrade Harry Greenwood was supposed to be here tonight. He's, as you know, is a veteran of D-Day. But unfortunately, he had to cancel because he's indisposed. So I will read the act of remembrance. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
We will remember them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. And thank you, Mr. Morton. And again, we look forward to seeing you on Saturday for the Veterans Lunch, as well as our walk around Park Royal for tagging. I will be there with my poppy dress on. This is my, I got a dress with poppies on it. And of course on Monday at the 11th day at 11 a.m. for tea at the library afterwards and a beer at the Legion after that. So we look forward to this, and thank you again for coming to council and reminding the community of how fortunate we are because of the acts, the selfless acts of many people over many years. So thank you. So with that, I'll ask council to make a motion. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, before I make the motion, I'd just like to say thank you very much for all the work you do in the community. It's ever inspiring. And I appreciated the statistics you gave us on the state of the Legions. Very interesting. And I'm very intrigued with your cross program, so good luck with that. On that note, I'd like to recommend that the presentation from the Royal Canadian Legion be received for information with thanks and gratitude.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. So item number 6 is the reconsideration of the environmental development permit application 19056 for 993 Sinclair Street. And we have the
Madam Mayor, I'd like to turn it over to our environmental protection lead, Heather Keith, to provide a brief presentation on this topic. Essentially what the presentation is on, it's an appeal of staff's decision regarding sports court in the riparian zone at 993 Sinclair.
Okay, good evening. As Jim said, this is a staff's overview on the applicant's decision to appeal the Director of Planning's decision for the retention of a sports court that was built in a watercourse protection area without a permit. The approval of environmental development permits is delegated to the Director of Planning, but under the Development Procedures Bylaw, if the applicant is refused, the applicant may request to council to reconsider the decision. This is an overview of the application site. 993 Sinclair Street is on the west side of Sinclair. McDonald Creek runs through the west side of the property from north to south. The shaded yellow area is a creek protection covenant area. The property is within the development permit area for watercourse protection. So any work within 15 meters of the top of the watercourse bank requires an environmental development permit through the planning department. All properties, just to note, on Sinclair Street are subjected to the development permit area for watercourse protection, as there are creeks that line or border each side of the street. So the location of the sports court on the property of 993 Sinclair is within the creek protection covenant area, as well as within the 15 meters of top of bank. Staff were notified on April 16th of 2019 that a sports court was built in the rear yard of 993 Sinclair. The rectangle shows where the sports court is located. It's within the 15-meter setback of McDonald Creek, which is a development permit area. And then the surrounding area of around the sports court is artificial grass. The sports court is also located within the Creek Protection Covenant area. The covenant area was established in 2003 when this property was subdivided in order to restrict future development within the creek area. As part of that, there was some riparian area enhancement work as a condition of the covenant. In 2018, the owner received an environmental development permit to construct the pool, which is the larger rectangle area. Part of the pool was within the creek setback area, but outside of the creek protection covenant area. They complied with the guidelines established for watercourse protection and received an improved environmental development permit for the project. At this time, in 2018, they requested a sports court in the same location that the current one is located, and staff denied that request because it did not comply with the guidelines for watercourse protection. The owners built the sports court following the final inspection of the environmental development permit for the pool, and once that file was closed and the building permits were closed. These are the photos of what the sports court looks like. It's quite close to the top of bank where the sandbags are located, and it's surrounded by artificial grass. Originally, as part of a condition of the environmental development permit for the pool, this area was planted with natural vegetation and natural lawn. Once the EDP was closed, the natural vegetation was removed, and the sports court and the artificial grass were installed. The construction of the sports court did not comply with several bylaws and policies that govern development adjacent to watercourses in the district. The official community plan establishes watercourse protection guidelines under NE 13 for any work around the creek areas. This includes no new structures within the 5 meters of top of bank of a watercourse, no new structures closer to the creek than existing structures, and you need to achieve no net loss of riparian habitat within 15 meters of the top of the watercourse bank. In addition, the construction of the Creeks bylaw also contravened the Creeks bylaw, which regulates construction without permits, requirement of permits within a creek area. The watercourse protection bylaw governs erosion and sediment control measures during development of a structure within the creek area. Staff did not receive any erosion and sediment control plans for the construction of the sports court, as we did not know that the sports court was being built. The location of the sports court, also within the Creek Protection Covenant area, was contravened against conditions that says that no new buildings, fill, and vegetation disruption is allowed within this area. And then finally, the riparian area regulations under the Provincial Riparian Areas Protection Act governs watercourse setback areas. The local government under this act are required to establish watercourse protection guidelines that adhere to these regulations, and the sports court would not adhere to the provincial regulations either. Staff's evaluation was that the sports court does not comply to the guidelines established for watercourse protection within the District of West Vancouver. The sports court was also constructed within a Creek Protection Covenant area in contravention to the conditions of the covenant. The retention of the sports court would contravene regulations that have been consistently applied to each private property within the District of West Vancouver that is adjacent to a watercourse. And the owner of the sports court was previously told that a sports court in that location would not be approved, and then they constructed it following this decision. Based on this evaluation, staff recommend that the environmental development permit for the sports court within the creek setback area be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Soprovich.
Madam Mayor, I would like to ask Mr. Satori of Satori Environmental a question, if he's in the audience. He was the consulting firm on the assessment. Mr. Satori, a letter has gone out from 993 Sinclair Street, West Vancouver, stating that Satori Environmental conducted an assessment of our play court and concluded it was safe and not harmful to the creek. Is that a correct statement?
That is incorrect.
Sorry?
That is an incorrect statement.
That's incorrect? Why
Yes.
so?
That is not, I guess that we didn't conclude that in our memo. The memo strictly addressed the impacts associated with it, and it was an interpretation by the owner of our memo that was incorrect.
Well, Madam Mayor, based on that information, somewhat harmful to Satori Environmental to make a statement like that and then have it reputed by the owner. I find that a little disconcerting to me. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Did the applicant wish to make a submission?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Booth and councilors. My name is Adam Hill. I am the applicant for 993 Sinclair Street, and I'm accompanied by Mr. Bill Chapman, which I imagine many of you are probably familiar with, and he was one of the appointed people on our project in terms of assessing this matter. So thank you for being here. First and foremost, I'd like to just brief introduction of who we are. I'm accompanied with my wife here this evening, and we have been residents of West Vancouver since 2008. We have 3 young children in the community, and we moved onto 993 Sinclair Street in 2012. And you know, with the materials that you've read, I feel like it's important to just put a stake in the ground and reassure you that we're big advocates of the environment. And in fact, you saw a picture there of a vehicle. It's a Hyundai Nexo, and it's actually probably the very first fuel cell vehicle being driven around in West Vancouver that runs on liquid hydrogen, which is said to be very good in terms of reducing the carbon footprint on our planet. So with that said, we're here tonight to talk about the children's play court that we installed, which was installed in the spring of this year. It is about the half size of a tennis court, and when we put this sports court in, it was built with non-toxic materials, a permeable surface, something that our children who enjoy playing outdoors was functional for hockey in particular, but also other sports. We were asked when we received notice from the District of West Vancouver staff, you know, that we were not permitted to have this court. We were advised to stop work, and we did that. The question, of course, is why did we build it? What motivated us to do this? And I think it's important to let you know that, as you heard, we installed a pool in our backyard. And at that time, we were given permission to install grass in the lower level of our property. And we did that. And we received sign-off on that permit. And the grass was not growing successfully. And you can see a little bit from the pictures here that the subject area is surrounded by a lot of large, tall vegetation that really restricts the ability for grass to grow effectively. And so when we weren't able to use that area for our children to play in, historically we used to have a playground down there and a playhouse. And when those were taken out in order to build the pool, we were really hoping that grass would help serve our needs in terms of, you know, safe play, supervised play for our children, and we weren't able to get that. So at the end of the day, we understand, you know, the issue at hand is that, you know, we didn't obtain a permit for the installation of our play court, and we regret that we didn't take that course of action to obtain the permit. You know, we know that we were given, basically from the district, we were told that we weren't able to do it. We went with what we knew was permissible, which was grass, and it wasn't functional. And so we put this in knowing that we had previously put in playground equipment before, and it hadn't seemed to be an issue. So that's on us, and that was our error. But we did so in putting the play court in. We did it with a great consideration for the environment, which I think bears, you know, going through. I don't think we object to the key issues that have been raised by district staff in terms of the issues that were outlined in the note to us. So with that said, the process to date, as I mentioned, we did stop the work when we were asked to do so. We went about applying for a permit, and in the time that we applied for a permit, it took us time to get all of our facts and figures together in working with Sartori. We received some fines, penalties of $500 a day for a period of time that we were not in compliance. But we did manage to get the paperwork in, and we were then told that we couldn't receive a permit. And so in the fullness of time, there's been a report by the District of West Vancouver that has gone out to the neighborhood about the permit application and the process being denied. And the couple of things that I think are worthy of note here is that the claim by the district is that this surface is not permeable, which I think was an unfortunate thing to point out, because we went to great lengths to demonstrate to the district staff that this was a permeable surface that was installed. So I'm not sure that some of the opposing letters from neighbors would sufficiently give them representation of the materials that were used. And also on this slide, there is concern by district staff that an off-site compensation project will not adequately offset the impact to slope stability, excess runoff to the creek, and loss of vegetative cover that contributes to high-quality fish habitat. And my question, I suppose, for district staff would be, in what circumstance was any kind of test done to say that there would be excess runoff to the creek, or that there would be a compromise to slope stability, because I wasn't aware of any testing being done to make that claim in their report. The actual sports court itself, how it was built, as I said, we were given permission to install grass, and that is literally the only thing that we pulled out in installing this play court. We didn't remove any other natural habitat. And so, again, there was no erosion of any other protected area, only the grass that we were given to work with. It is within a boundary fence that has existed since we purchased the property. As I mentioned, that the actual surface is completely permeable, non-toxic, and it's also a product that is being used at Canada Place for the Port of Vancouver, which went through a stringent environmental study. We also used non-treated wood surround material that's not treated, in order to be protective of the environment. And we also created it such that it was isolated in terms of visibility for our neighborhood. There's a great debate, I'm sure, around the benefits of synthetic lawn versus natural grass. But for us, the idea of installing artificial turf was, again, because we couldn't get grass to successfully grow in that area, certainly not without a lot of extra fertilizer. But in terms of artificial turf, we were given permission to use artificial turf within the 15-meter setback. So we didn't think that artificial turf in and of itself would be problematic under the district's eyes. We contend that given the proximity of the play court and where the grass is installed, that we actually think there's net positive benefits of installing artificial turf and this permeable play court, because it means then that you don't have to fertilize the grass, which has the potential of leaching into the creek. You also don't need to water it in the summer when there's watering restrictions, and you also avoid the carbon footprint of mowing the grass and the degradation of grass clippings. It should be noted that synthetic lawn is an approved product within other municipalities, such as Langford, Langley, and West Kelowna, and as I mentioned already, a permitted product when we got our original pool permit. As far as neighborhood support goes, I've duly noted tonight that there were 5 opposing letters for the project or for the appeal. We have now 13 letters of support from local residents. mostly stating that they believe that it's helpful for the community, for their kids that come and play at the court, and it keeps the kids safe where the street is not conducive for play. There are three solutions, and we have attempted to work with district staff to try and find a compromise and a workable solution, but it didn't appear as though any conversation around a compromise or negotiation would be fitting in this case. So the three options we wish to bring forward this evening, the first option is, to keep the play court as is. And we've noted that there are some areas within that 5-meter top of bank where there are invasive species that we would be prepared to clean up and make good. Option B would be, as you see in this illustration, to trim a part of the play court such that we're outside of the 5-meter top of bank. This is a rough sketch which was prepared to give an idea of the magnitude of the sports court that would be trimmed to be outside of the 5 meters. It's about 12% of the play court. And option C would be to potentially consider an offset project. One of the concerns has been the loss of habitat where the sports court was installed. And there is precedence, and it is something that the district occasionally considers is an offset of the habitat loss for other community projects. And that's where we did engage with Mr. Sartori to recommend a project that would be helpful for the community and the environment, and we would be open to that option too. And of course, in any condition of those options, we would respectfully hope that we would be able to also retain the artificial turf that surrounds the play court area. As far as option A, why is that a viable option? The option being to keep it as is. If you can see in this diagram here, this was part of the drawings from the original pool project of the permitted space. And I'm a layperson when it comes to design, but what I have noticed is that the green area actually encroaches upon the 5-meter setback line to the creek. And so that's why we didn't feel like when we replaced the grass that we were actually encroaching on the 5-meter setback. I didn't realize that you could put grass within a protected watercourse area. So it's definitely our error that we put something within the 5-meter setback. But considering that grass was already permitted to be in there, and the fact that you'd be fertilizing that grass so close to the creek seems intriguing to me. I would also say that we only replaced the grass for a non-toxic permeable surface that isn't going to be causing harm. And we also have a lot of landscaping on the rest of our property, including across the creek, which is a complete riparian area that we are not able to do anything with. With that said, the option C is a stream keeping project that, again, I would not have known about unless it was something that there had been precedence for in the district to support offsetting projects. We're not trying to buy our way out of this problem. It was something that was brought to us as a potential solution that helps to offset the habitat loss that we've caused by installing the play surface. In this stream keeping project, it would be located at Cave Creek in West Bay Park, and it's a restoration project that has so far had difficulty being funded, and we're offering to help support that project, which would be creating a better passage for fish and highest productivity spawning habitat within that watershed. And as I mentioned, we know that the district staff do have latitude to consider these things under other circumstances. So with that said, I thank you for the consideration. I remain open to questions.
Thank you. Councillor Gambioli.
Jeez, I forgot my question now. No, I think I didn't forget my question. I wanted to ask staff, actually, just for clarity on the bylaws. this, so there's a lot of bylaws and protection guidelines involved, but really, it's the watercourse protection bylaw that talks about the 5 and 15 meters from top of bank. But this application for an appeal has come in through the development procedures bylaw. So how does this differ from the other two cases that we've seen in the past? The bridge over Lawson Creek, the stairway up in the British properties, were those both under the watercourse protection bylaw? And I'm just wondering about the appeal process. Is it the same process? Are we dealing with something different here?
Sure. Madam Mayor, in both of the circumstances that you mentioned before, those structures were constructed, again, without a permit in a riparian zone. And in those cases, council, I believe, actually instructed staff to have those removed. His council directed that. In this circumstance, the applicant constructed fill in a structure within a riparian zone. And the bylaw does say, so the OCP, and it's implemented through the development procedures bylaw, but they're tied procedurally. The development procedures bylaw essentially allows somebody, when they don't agree with the decision of a director, to appeal the director's decision. And that's why it's before you. And essentially the genesis of that is that, when council adopted these bylaws in 2004, you wanted the ability to have an avenue of appeal for folks in the community, to be able to look at staff's decisions and provide that extra level of scrutiny, if you will. And that's the reason that the bylaw was written like that, and that's the reason why that's in front of you tonight. So staff's recommendation is clear. Council has the ability to agree with or not agree with staff.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Sofrovich, well, actually, Councillor
Yes, I was there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hill, for your presentation. Was it confusing on your part to make a statement to the neighbors that Satori Environmental conducted an assessment of your play area and concluded that it was, in fact, was safe and not harmful to the creek? As you heard Mr. Satori say, that wasn't true. Was there some mix-up in how you read that environmental review?
When I wrote that letter for the neighbors, it was in the context that I had actually met with Mr. Sartori on site, and we had talked about the project and the pickle that we were in terms of having installed it without a permit. And I was asking him how we could potentially resolve this issue, and it was Mr. Sartori that agreed to help support us through recommending an off-site project. And in those discussions and subsequently having two letters regarding the offsetting project from Mr. Sartori, the inference is that we weren't causing harm. I don't think that someone of his profession would go out of his effort to help us if it was obvious that we were doing harm. I had explained the permeability of the play court and the fact that it was non-toxic, and he seemed satisfied with that. And so I've apologized to Mr. Sartori if it was taken out of context, his intentions. It was certainly not my intention. I inferred that we weren't doing anything harmful to the environment by the fact that we had engaged him and he was willing to work with us.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I just a couple questions for staff. If he were to remove the court, can you clarify what could actually be put in that area of the property, in the 15-meter proximity?
Madam Mayor, in terms of what could be put there, we wouldn't speculate on that until we received, a complete application. Essentially, somebody who came forward with a proposal to do something in that riparian zone would need to meet the test of your regulations, which are you couldn't put any structure closer than existing. You'd have to achieve no net loss of riparian habitat. You'd have to avoid the most environmentally sensitive areas on the site. The other key piece, too, is that there's an overlapping covenant that largely deals with flood construction and flood mitigation associated with that site. So as a bit of history, when the site was subdivided in 2007, 2003, I believe, that's when the covenant was registered on site that essentially had that area as a natural area to deal with the potential flooding of McDonald Creek and the sensitivity of that riparian zone. So in addition to the development permit guidelines, they would also have to meet the conditions of the covenant that go as far as to say no structure, no fill, essentially maintained in a natural condition. So again, I'm not going to speculate as to what could go in there. We've already issued a permit, for example, that allowed for shrubbery, natural ground cover, grass to be in that area. So something that's generally consistent with that is what I would expect staff would continue to approve, as we did when we approved the original development permit about a year ago.
Okay, in that respect, if you were to put grass in, are there concerns or rules against using fertilizer that close in the zone?
Madam Mary, there may be, and if somebody were to, for example, foul the watercourse and we were to become aware of it through, we may enforce that under the provisions of our watercourse protection bylaw. Again, and maybe Ms. Keith would like to speak to this, not necessarily knowing the toxicity of various fertilizers on the market. That certainly could be a concern if substances were put into the watercourse by any owner in an attempt to keep up their lawn. So again, like weed killers, all that kind of thing, or just things you're not allowed to have because of a pesticide ban, but we would have concerns with fertilizers going in there. But that's not to say that somebody necessarily has to have a lawn. If they couldn't grow a lawn, then they may want to come back to us and say, hey, is there another impermeable natural ground cover that we could put on this site, like clover or bark mulch or something like that, that would be consistent with our riparian regulations.
Thank you. Did you want to speak to that, Ms. Keith?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'll just add to that a little bit. Under the provincial regulations, the revegetation guidelines are specific to allowing native species of plants and shrubs in the riparian area. And this is primarily because you're not supposed to use fertilizers within that area. But if you plant native vegetation that's adapted to the region, then they shouldn't really require that type of fertilizer for growth, and they should be able to grow and thrive. And so the revegetation guidelines that we provide to applicants for their landscaping plans are from the province, and they're a list of native species to this area that will grow well in a creek area.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Councillor Wong?
Thank you, Your Worship. So question for staff. The scenario that we find ourselves in, is this a frequent occurrence in the district, or is this pretty rare, or what,
Madam Mayor, maybe I'll respond. I think it's relatively infrequent. For the most part, neighbors and residents are aware of our regulations. When they come in and they're specifically instructed that something would not be approved, it's pretty rare that they would go ahead and build that anyways. And we try to do a good job of getting the message out there. We work with stream keepers, residents are aware. Residents along Sinclair are certainly aware of our riparian regulations, as we've regulated, and we've even had things in the news over the last couple of years about things in the riparian zone there. So overall, I think that folks are relatively well aware and that this is a relatively rare occurrence.
Thank you.
All right, so we do have a few speakers from the public. So I'll call up Mr. Barker, John Barker, and then Stephen Knight after that, and then Lucinda Jones.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm John Barker. I live in West Vancouver in the Dunderave area, and I'm president tonight in front of you representing West Vancouver Stream Keepers. Just a brief note on that, we're 275 members, largest all-volunteer stewardship group in the province, and well respected in this community, I believe, for the work we do on a volunteer basis, looking after creeks, habitat, streams, education, salmon, all the elements that go into the 22 creeks and tributaries in our community. My simple message today is it's a voice of desperation on somebody who's done something that they knew they were doing wrong, made application some time ago from what was told tonight for approval for EDP, Environment Development Permit, for a pool and a sport court, and the sport court was turned down and the pool was built. That seemed to be the end of the story. And then somehow staff or somebody found out that the sport court was actually built without an environment development permit, without a building permit, and just done, in my mind, recklessly and willfully, and just in a rude assault against the community and doing something like that. Bill Soprovich, Councillor Soprovich, a number of years asked me when I was sitting at this table with students, what did I think about the creek protection measures and bylaws, the two of them that exist. And I said they were fine, and they'd been modeled on other communities in the Lower Mainland, and they worked well, and they're well written. The problem is they're not always followed, and that is distressing to streamkeepers to see that people are just conduct their own affairs. Here's a case of somebody made application. There's no surprises to him as to what really it was expected, and got turned down and then carried on. There's no half measure here. That application that they've made for an EDP retroactively has to be turned down, and that person has to have that sports court removed. It's wrong. It does not belong. There's a lot of other fluff flying around about this that I call noise. The issue here is there were laws in place that stand the test of time, and they should be honored and respected.
Thank you, Mr. Barker.
That concludes my comments.
Thank you. All right, I will call up Mr. Knight. Thank you.
Madam Mayor and Council, I'm a longtime resident of West Vancouver. I was born and raised, born in Grace Hospital. My parents drove me across the bridge to Rabbit Lane, and have been living here for the majority of my life since. And, you know, Council has a tough job, and it's balancing the needs of society. And in every society, there's competing needs. And, you know, I'm a father with young kids, and, you know, we're looking for safe places for our kids to play, and we're looking for safe places for our kids not to be sitting there watching video games, which is the alternative. We're living in an increasingly more urban and a more dangerous society, and it's becoming tough for you to find places for your kids to safely play, especially when they're in their younger years. And you know, I realize the need to maintain the streams in our community. But we've got to balance that with the other needs of our community. And I'd also, you know, and I'd also like to say that, you know, in balancing those needs and work within these areas of stream keeping, as the past speaker talked about, there's the option of mitigation. And basically, it sounds to me like there's a chance to really do something in a park to improve a stream, and that would be a far greater benefit to spawning fish and the community than the minor loss of this. You know, I grew up fishing in Brothers Creek, and today I'm not sure that there's a lot of fish there, and I'd like to see them again, and I'm hoping that a little bit of work on Hay Creek would help some kids be able to take their fishing lines and go down and fish. Anyway, I don't want to take up a lot of council's time, and I appreciate they've got to balance all the needs of society. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, Lucinda Jones.
Good evening, Mayor, staff, council. I've taken some time over the past few days to read the documentation provided by way of links to this agenda item at the district's website. I have to say I am aggravated that both my municipal tax dollars and the energies of staff, mayor, and council are herein being squandered. But this is the process, I think, of moving together collaboratively and democratically. But the factual history here, as I understand it, is that the sport court was clearly refused by staff in January of 2018. And then after the $6,000 deposit was returned in October of 2018, upon completion of the permitted pool, this property owner went ahead anyway and constructed the sports court. not within 15 meters, but actually within 5 meters of the bank of McDonald Creek. While the hills may be ecologically unaware of how vital the health, function, and productivity of creeks and streams are to all landscapes, including that which they have deed to fully cognitively have constructed that which had been so clearly denied, I find inexcusable. And then to produce a lawyer rather than correcting and apologizing for this ecological misdemeanor, I don't know. I feel like calling a spade here. Remedy for situations such as this is put forth from the district in the terms of Instrument Part 2, Section 219, Creek Control Covenant from February 2004, directly related to this property. On page 4, Section 4, quote, if the grantor, that being the owner of the lands, fails to undertake the remediation and revegetation of the creek protection area, in this case by July 1, 2005, the grantor hereby authorizes the municipality through its servants, contractors, and others to enter upon the lands and carry out the remediation and revegetation of the creek protection area to the satisfaction of the municipality's environmental coordinator at the sole cost and expense of the grantor, and the expenses incurred shall constitute a debt due and owing to the municipality by the grantor, and the municipality may charge the cost of effecting such remedial measures against the lands in the same manner as taxes. I think it's quite simple, and I think this needs to be used more and more, and also to empower people. Land holdings which include a creek running across them requires the owner to steward that section of the creek for the safety and health of all citizens of the district. And if landowners don't understand the importance of their role and understand the terms of engagement of having a creek across their property, the municipality needs to assist those people in understanding.
Thank you. All right, and I'll go to Mr. Prentice, Fergus Prentice.
Thanks. Mayor, council, staff. I am a direct neighbor of the property. I sent a letter dated October 15th, which I don't see as being part of the submissions, so I thought I'd take it upon myself to either, well, I won't read the letter. I think most of the issues have been covered. The only thing that I'd be concerned of that I'd like to point out is that the proposal to have an offsetting environmental benefit somewhere else in the district at the cost of having this sport court remain might be good for everybody else other than the direct neighbors who, in my case, for example, purchase property knowing full well what the bylaws are, expecting and paying a premium for having a nice, quiet creek in our backyard, and then now there's a proposal that maybe the neighbors can keep their preferred sports court, preferred use of that land at the expense of the neighbors who are purchasing, living there, and expecting to have quiet and peace. The sound of running water and squirrels and raccoons is quite different than slap shots on a chain link fence, and I think that that's something you need to take into consideration as well. That's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this matter before? Ms. Ranch, and I'm sorry I was calling you Teresa the other night. I know, it's Therese.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Therese Ranch, West Vancouver. Mayor and Council, I want to express my support for staff's position on this issue. The applicants knew what they were doing and it was a contravention of the regulations. They've been denied approval, but they proceeded anyway, and this behavior should not be rewarded. I do recall a conversation I had with BPP regarding the Five Creeks ISMP, and the conclusion was that this construction of a huge pipe was necessary as a consequence of the district allowing encroachments and construction on or near our creeks. Our climate emergency declaration should influence your decision. Yes, bad behavior should not be rewarded. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? All right, any other questions? Oh, Councillor Soprovich?
Sorry, I put my hand up.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hi, Lisa Jonke. We're West Vancouver residents. I'm speaking sort of a lay person. I have kids in the neighborhood that have enjoyed playing on the sport court. It keeps them off the street. It keeps them safe. There's a lot of cars that go up and down the streets there. I would hope that we could come to some sort of compromise where perhaps, even if it's kept for a couple of years, I know that there have been allowances for that before as well, until maybe the kids were a little older and off the streets and just able to play safely. It's a great place for the kids to play, and we've really enjoyed having it there to keep our kids off the street and safe.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more speakers, I will get the motion put on the floor by Councillor Cameron.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a recommendation that all written and oral submissions regarding environmental development permit application 19-056 for 993 Sinclair Street up to and including the council meeting held on November 4th, 2019 be received for information.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay.
Secondly, I'll make a recommendation that environmental development permit application 19-056 for 993 Sinclair Street, which would allow for the retention of a sport court structure within 15 meters of the top of Bank McDonald Creek, be denied.
Okay, so any debate on this?
I'll just very briefly say that I think Mr. Barker said it better than I can. We have bylaws in this community, and although I do have sympathy for the applicant and and his desire in this situation to have a sport court for his kids, we can't allow our environmental bylaws to be breached without recourse, and I think it would be improper for us to have a situation where the bylaw was breached and someone can buy their way out of a breach. And so I think at this situation we just have to enforce our bylaws lest we send an unfortunate message to the rest of the community that our bylaws are optional.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Soprovich?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I went to see Mr. Hill, a beautiful property and incredible work done on the property. It's unfortunate that that the sports court went into the riparian area. I mean, we cannot forget why we have these laws. It in no way enhances the long-term ecosystem or diversity of the stream. We have these rules in place for a reason. I'm a little taken back that Mr. Hall would go ahead and disregard the concerns of staff and state, well, I did it anyway. It should not be easier to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. I think it's unfortunate that Satori Environmental had to take a hit with this, and I know that Mr. Hall apologized here tonight in public to you, Mr. Satori. I don't know if that's enough for you, but you are a firm that's been around for many years and have supplied an incredible amount of knowledge and insight and assessment for many developments in this on the North Shore. So you're a very reputable firm. So I hope that that has no implications for you. it's a toughie, but unfortunately, I have to go with the denial.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
I've been on the court as well in the torrential downpour, and it's a remarkable surface. There wasn't a puddle around. I haven't seen anything like that. And as a parent myself, you know, it's great to see people looking for opportunities to create an environment where their kids can play safely and independently. And from the letters of support that you received from your street, I know there was a few against, but you know, it's almost viewed as a community amenity, and it's such a shame that the circumstance rolled out this way. And because of that, I can't support keeping the court for that very reason. It would be interesting to entertain allowing them to leave it for a couple years, as one of the neighbors suggested. I don't know what sort of mechanisms are in place or what the removal time would be anyway. But anyway, it's unfortunate because I think you've been as sensitive as you could, but because of the way we've gone about it, we can't support it as council, or I can't. Thank you.
Councillor Wong.
Worship, I certainly hear arguments on both sides, and I'd like to take Councillor Cameron's comments perhaps even further. It's not just our environmental bylaws that need to be enforced, but all of our bylaws need to be enforced. So I think that's something that's really important. You know, I certainly echo also Councillor Thompson's comments that it is unfortunate that we're at this juncture, but the bylaw is the bylaw, and that must be supremely held impartially. I'd be curious to see if there could be other means implemented, for example, a gate at the driveway, so that children can play there safely without you know, cars and traffic, that sort of thing. Certainly I remember growing up on my driveway as a child and playing street hockey, basketball, those sorts of things in a closed environment where my parents could do their own thing and not have to worry about children getting run over.
Thank you. Councillor Gambioli.
Well, I'll try not to repeat too much of what's been said. I actually put on my gumboots once a week this time of year, and I go to Brothers Creek and I count salmon. And I do that as a volunteer for West Van Streamkeepers with a group of students from grade 8 and grade 9 at Rockridge School. And we count chum salmon, we count coho salmon, and from time to time we count Chinook salmon. So far this year we've counted 14 salmon in Brothers Creek. And what is also interesting is that just within my 500 or so meter stretch of Brothers Creek that we survey, there are at least 2 man-made impediments to salmon going up that creek. There's a big area of poured concrete that someone in the past poured in the middle of the river, and there's another wooden sort of baffled dam sort of structure that stops the salmon from going up a tributary to that river. So this has been happening for a long time, and that's part of the reason why this bylaw was put in place and why it's very important. So for me, when I hear that streamkeepers tell us there are 22 creeks and tributaries in West Vancouver, it's not appropriate to make compromises in a case like this, and it sets a dangerous precedent to even talk about making compromises, in my opinion. We need to show with decisions like this to staff and to the community that we stand behind our own bylaws, and we stand behind the decisions that have already been made by our staff who are expertly interpreting those bylaws for us. In fact, to go a little bit further, I find it really distressing that in the past 3 or 4 years, this is the 3rd case that has come before us of a homeowner building something in the riparian area and coming back to us on appeal. I think this is a really large waste of staff time and resources, of taxpayers' money, and of the time of council. I would really love to remove that appeal process in our bylaw, and I would like staff to consider discussing that with us at another time. I think it's harmful to the neighborhood. When these appeals come forward, neighbors are pitted against neighbors, and it's really unpleasant, as we have heard from several neighbors who have written to us. So, for all those reasons, I support rejecting the environmental development permit application, and I would really like to be clear with staff that if this is rejected today, that I would really strictly want to follow the bylaws. I would really not like to see plastic grass within that 15 meters either. I personally believe, and you can look at the science, that plastic grass is just as bad as toxic chemicals. And in that particular place, as a gardener, I would plant moss or I would plant clover, and there's no need for fertilizers for those.
All right, so if everyone's finished speaking, I'll just say that we do have a difficult job on council. Sometimes the decisions are difficult ones, but we take on this job willingly. When we get sworn in, one of our oaths is to uphold the district's laws. I'm also a lawyer, so I feel that obligation even stronger, I would say. I did find it egregious that the applicant knew that this was wrong and went forward regardless. That was really quite unfortunate. So I won't support this either. Support the appeal, and I will call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Carried unanimously. All right, so we'll move on to the next item. Which is item number 7, the Thunderbird Marina zoning amendment bylaw.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Wilhelm, who will provide a brief presentation on a rezoning amendment, its first reading for Thunderbird Marina. Over to you, Eric.
Okay. Okay, 1 second here. So again, good evening, council members. I have prepared a brief presentation and overview of zone amending bylaw 4938-2019, which is applicable to Thunderbird Marina, located at 5776 Marine Drive. So Thunderbird Marina has operated in Fisherman's Cove since the early 1950s. On site, there is 1 primary marina building and 3 maintenance buildings. There is an extensive network of on-water moorage facilities providing slips for over 600 boats. As indicated on screen, the majority of the land is utilized for vehicle parking, boat storage, boat maintenance, and boat sales areas. So again, as indicated on screen, Thunderbird Marina's lands are currently split zoned. The water lot and a portion of the lands are currently zoned Marine Zone 3, the M3 zone, and with the remaining land zoned Commercial Restricted Zone 3, the CR3 zone. So historically, there have been a number of non-conforming outdoor uses occurring on site, namely boat and engine repairs and maintenance, storage of boats taller than 12 feet, and boat engine sales and displays have been occurring throughout the site. The zoning bylaw amendment will allow for the aforementioned outdoor uses throughout the site, legitimize the historical outdoor uses, and allows the marina to continue operations in full compliance with the zoning bylaw. So the staff report provided to council recommends that the amending bylaw be given first reading and a public hearing be scheduled. Progression of the bylaw is recommended, mainly given that the proposed allowable uses have been historically occurring on site and are typical of marina operations. The marina has been operating for a number of years without substantial complaints. There are no buildings or construction proposed within the bylaw, and there are no changes to parking needs, and overall, again, it allows the marina to operate in full compliance with the zoning bylaw. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Cameron?
Mr. Wilhelm, it's interesting that this one comes right after the previous item, because the way I see it is that this marina has a certain zoning with restrictions on it, and the owners have been using it for a period of time, it seems like a long period of time, in a way that contradicts the zoning. And what you're proposing to do seems to me to be changing the rules to make retroactively what they've been doing improperly for, well, you didn't specify, I don't think, but for a long time, legal. And so I guess I'm concerned about setting that kind of precedent where, you know, if you just start doing things you're not allowed to do, and you do it long enough without getting caught, we'll just approve it. And then the second piece, and maybe you can speak to this, is the CAC. I've noticed there's no community amenity contribution levied, and you say there's no increase in the density, no proposed development. Well, I agree, there's neither of those, but there's obviously a value to having a more liberal zoning, or to be allowed to do a broader range of activities on the zone. So that value has a financial value to the marina, obviously, or they wouldn't be doing it. So, or they wouldn't be asking for permission to keep doing it. So I'm a bit, I have no issue with Thunderbird Marina, but I do think the process here is somewhat curious. And it seems to me that, we should be asking ourselves what are the implications of allowing this, and B, in this application, it should be reflected. There should be some form of compensation going from the marina to the district to reflect the liberalized zoning that they're asking for.
Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, point well taken. I'd like to, I guess, acknowledge a couple of distinguishing facts. One is generally the policy that exists. The official community plan includes a policy that essentially is there to encourage the retention of existing marinas. And as these marinas evolve, and I take your point that they're looking at regularizing a use that technically is not permitted. I mean, and just to be clear, what they're doing is they're working on boats outside of buildings instead of inside of buildings. And so this came to our attention during the review of a business license. Business licenses came to us and flagged it in terms of the renewal of a license. So in order to keep marinas functioning, to keep them kind of healthy and economic contributor, a lot of folks in West Vancouver use marinas. That's one of the reasons that you have that policy. And we see this as essentially a logical extension of that. The other piece that I think is relevant is that the general intention, as staff understand it, of keeping those uses inside of buildings was to prevent noise. And at the time, for example, like it would be noise for surrounding neighborhoods. At the time, we might not have had, in fact, I know we likely didn't have as many bylaw officers as we did, whether this was, many years or even decades ago, patrolling to see that we were disturbing folks. Now we have a noise control bylaw that if there is, noise or disturbance to folks, that people can call in, complain, and we can take action that way, so that we're still, meeting the intent of putting the work inside a building. If it's outside of a building and we're disturbing somebody, we'll close it, we'll fine them, that sort of thing. So the noise control bylaw actually, I think, provides the function of what the intent of the bylaw is. Hence the rationale for support. I'm totally with you. I agree with you that there are some similarities to the previous application, but on balance, staff felt that this was something that we could support. In terms of the residual land lift, again, we look at this in terms of when we look at a community amenity contribution, it's generally a function of the value of the land before compared to the value of the land after. If council would like us to pursue a CAC, we're happy to do that. It's not recommended. On first blush, staff don't believe that there is a land lift associated with allowing uses to happen inside or outside of a building, but again, we're happy to do that if you'd like us to.
Okay, well, I take your point about the boat and engine repairs and maintenance, but it seems to me that it's boat and engine repairs and maintenance at all that's non-conforming with the existing notion. It doesn't say outdoor boat and engine repairs and maintenance. And then I'm on page 143 of the package, page 3 of the report, and the third bullet I note says boat and engine sales and displays. So you're effectively saying you can display and sell boats and engines on this property. So you're changing it from a marina use to, at least in part, a commercial use or retail use. I mean, I don't see that this is limited in geographic scope or extent. I mean, does this allow them to have, a retail outlet to sell boats and engines? Like, is it limited to what's happening already? Is it, so I just don't, it doesn't seem to be qualified to, maybe I'm missing something, maybe you can show me, but it seems that you're allowing a retail use of this property that may be broader than what it's presently being used at, and is certainly more valuable than simply having a marina, and arguably different then, because I know West Van Yacht Club doesn't have a boat and engine sales and display location. Neither does Eagle Harbor, as far as I know.
Through the mayor, so point taken on the boat and engine sales and displays, and if you like, we can go back and relook at that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a minimum I would think you'd want to severely restrict it. I mean, if someone has got a boat there, it's obviously nice if they can buy an engine if their engine goes on the fritz, but you'd want to severely restrict what sorts of operations you're now grandfathering into at no more than is what's presently being done. But this whole thing does leave me, I have to say, a little bit uncomfortable. I don't want to unduly thwart the marina, but this really, and use the term a technical breach of the bylaw. Well, I think we just established in the previous agenda item that there's no such thing. There's breaches of the bylaws and there's not breaches of the bylaws, and this is a breach. And I guess the last question I have for you, can you tell us whether the marina knew at any point that their properties were restricted to these uses and were deliberately flouting the bylaw? Do you have any information in that regard?
Madam Mayor, is there anybody from the marina here that would like to speak to that? So, Mr. DePfeiffer.
Council staff, my name is Mike DePfeiffer. I'm General Manager of Thunderbird. So we're going to work a little bit of history here. My family was involved with the marina from inception in 1952, and my grandfather's no longer, but my 85-year-old uncle's still alive and well, and former presidents, etc. So I'm pretty familiar, despite being only 50, I'm pretty familiar with the history. I'll go back and say we didn't approach the municipality on this. This was indeed somebody, a business sold licensing, went to Jim's office, and we were told that these things need to be cleaned up at all marinas and yacht clubs. If you technically read the bylaw in M3 and M2 and M1, you could not work on an outboard engine in the water. So you run a sailing program for kids at Westman Yacht Club or Eagle Harbor Yacht Club. The bylaw would not allow a mechanic to work on that boat that goes out and rescues the kid. It'd have to be done inside a building. And I'm pretty sure the municipality wouldn't like a giant building somewhere in West Vancouver that can accommodate the 2,500 or 3,000 boats that are in the municipality. Or you can send that business to another municipality and we can lose a bunch of good paying jobs. So then the last thing I'll say is, and again, I've talked to the planning office about this. In 1964, there was an agreement between the municipality, the district, and the predecessor to Thunderbird Marine Corp. And it's a reason, the reason why in our old plans in our office, we see CR3A, and the A related to an amended, it's essentially an agreement that was between the municipality and the marina that allowed the selling of boats. Western Chris-Craft Sales was a massive sales operation in West Vancouver in the late 60s and 70s. We were the biggest bayliner dealer in the world out of that location. So this has been going on for a long time. The municipality's been completely supportive, been collecting taxes on it. And there was an agreement in 1964. Unfortunately, nobody in staff have been able to find that agreement, but we do have the old drawings that refer to that. I can't find the agreement either, but there's no way the municipality would have allowed us to be the biggest bayliner dealer in the world if we weren't allowed to sell boats on the property.
So this is all good history because this is not in the staff report.
Right.
So you're saying that there was an agreement, you think, from the early 60s between the marina and West Van,
Yeah, it was signed by the
tacitly
Reeve.
approving of a sales center and some sort of...
Not only sales center, but the maintenance of boats.
And a maintenance center.
Yeah.
But nobody can find that agreement.
No.
But
At least
so-
in staff,
So the entire time you thought you were acting consistent with what you...
Certainly, and
is
again-
What you're saying, you thought you were acting, what you thought was...
Without question, because we were engaged.
Consistent with the zoning.
We were engaged with bylaw many times. If we made too much noise on our site, we would see bylaw there. We don't anymore, but there was a period of time that we would see bylaw, and there was no issue with what we were doing. It was how we were doing it. We were too loud. We were pressure washing too loud, or whatever it may be. But there was never any issue with what we were doing. It was only recently that planning said, hey, technically you're not allowed to store a boat that's bigger than 12 feet or taller than 12 feet. Think of the boats. Virtually every one is taller than 12 feet when it comes out of the water.
Yeah.
And there's no lift for us. There's no lift. There's like...
Madam Mayor, may I
sorry.
qualify
yeah.
a couple of comments?
Sure.
So, first of all, I just want to be really clear that planning didn't raise this issue or chase Thunderbird Marina. This came up again because there was a sale of the property, and when a business license happens, we reissue a business license to the new business owner, and during that, a bylaw inspection officer is going to look at whether or not it's in compliance, right? So I don't want folks to think that we're out looking for 12-foot boats and whether or not they meet the zoning. With respect to the zoning, again, it's split zoning. So the M3 zoning does allow the sale of boats. The adjacent whatever it is, the CR3 zone doesn't allow it. So we're allowing the sales on both of those zones to kind of bring that into compliance. So Councillor Cameron, you're correct. There is that new use that will happen on the CR3 zone. But as the overall site, you could sell boats on what is the Thunderbird Marina site, just on a certain portion of it. And we're essentially saying, like, let's just allow that on the whole site.
Okay, so, Mr. Bailey, just for future reference, that isn't clear from the materials you provided to
I
council.
appreciate that.
And this sort of 1960s, look, we've come across this before, these 50-year-old agreements that nobody can find anymore, so I don't think it's just an excuse. I think I take you at your word. But all of that would have been really useful information to have in the report, because as it is now, it's a lot less sympathetic than when the proponent speaks. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Councillor Soprovich?
Madam Mayor, I was going to ask you before you left. I had some complaints from area residents about the noise coming from the film industry, which was on your site for quite some time. I think that the problem never did get solved. In having the film industry there, was that Mr. Bailey, one of the permitted uses?
Councillor Sawrich, could you repeat that question again? Sorry, I didn't quite follow that.
I had a complaint about noise coming from Thunderbird Marina a while back, 2 years ago, because the film industry was working what appeared to be overtime. And I'm asking you, is having the film industry there a permitted use?
Madam Mayor, having the film industry there, I guess they would have to get a special events license to have permission to do filming, which would be granted through a process in the Community Services Division through the district. And the district would look at the surrounding neighborhood impacts as part of that.
So I guess collectively what we want to do is say nothing's grandfathered anymore. There are uses there that did not conform, and tonight we're going to make it settle into be conforming, all under one roof. I do concur with Councillor Cameron that it seems to me that I guess I had a friend that used to have a marine store there. I guess that was
John.
permitted use or not, I don't know. He's no longer there. He went to Park Royal. But it seems to me that we had
Now, Councillor Soprovich, is this a question, because we're going to be moving into debate shortly.
So I guess there is, under Marine 3, Zone 3, there are about 12 permitted uses, which basically is what you follow or have followed in the past.
Correct.
And the ones that were not, they're, in your eyes, they're supposed to be grandfathered?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just answer the film? Your film office asked that we have a business license with respect to that. That came up a couple of years ago, and then we have subsequently changed the way we deal with film to deal with noise, and
thank you.
I believe it's better.
Thank you. Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Bailey, did this whole process trigger perhaps a similar investigation into other yacht clubs and marinas that might have similar inconsistencies in bylaws, or in zoning, rather?
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Wong, it did not. Again, the trigger on this was the transfer of the business license, which then made it come to our attention. And then the business license would not be issued unless they were in compliance with zoning, hence the reason to do that. Like, we wouldn't go out or I haven't instructed anyone to go out and just look for this in other marinas.
Sure, but I was just wondering, because certainly this is not the first time this business license has been renewed. Hence, if it only just got caught, I'm curious about other sites, that's all.
Yeah, and again, through the mayor, I think a reason of that would just be the diligence of bylaw officers looking at that and picking this up as they're doing their job.
Thank you.
Mr. Bailey, it might have been before your time, but we did have actually a similar case, at least one, come before council with a non-conforming use on Clyde Avenue, and it was like a card shop in that little commercial office building, might have been the Hollingsworth building, and the person was allowed to do certain things, office, and it turned into retail, and we actually did approve because again, historical evolution of the district, and we ended up approving, the same, it was identical to this, these historical uses that people don't knowingly, end up where they, So there is a precedent for this, and I do think this is quite different than the environmental permit one, to be honest, but, all right, so Councillor Thompson.
Is there a difference in zoning or land use between a marina and a yacht club?
Madam Mayor, no, not that I'm in different marine zones. There are different marine zones, but typically no. Again, this is unique, this site, and it is actually spelled out in the staff report that what you have here is you have split zoning on this site. So you have a marina that's zoned M3 and CR3 because of whatever historical legacy. And for us, looking at a map, you can see the line on the map, but for the person operating the marina, they don't know where the exact line works, and so they might be working on boats on one side of the line, and that's not consistent with the bylaw. Hence the reason to clean this up. So again, it says, historical outdoor marina activities are occurring throughout the upland portion of the marina that are non-conforming with existing zoning. So we're trying to bring that into compliance, right?
Yeah, and I understand that. It's just more, the type of use that happens at a yacht club seems quite different from a marina. Less a social space until you're out on the water, and having a motor available or services available is much more than nice. It's actually essential. In a marina, I don't think you'd have many takers in your marina if you didn't have those sort of services available. Thank you.
All right, so seeing no more questions, I'll get the motion on the floor by Councillor Gambioli. Oh, no. By Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that the rezoning be read a first time.
Further discussion or debate? Councillor Thompson?
No, go for it.
I just want to thank you for being sensible and rational. I fully support this.
Okay. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And secondly, that a topic here be scheduled for December 3rd as per the motion.
Okay. All in favor? Sorry.
What? Huh? No?
Yeah.
Did I
no.
do it
Okay,
wrong?
sorry, I missed that. Just a sec. Regarding rezoning, be read the first time, and then, so there's two more motions. Yeah.
No, there's
Oh,
only-
yeah, sorry, you've done the one,
yes,
onto
yes.
the second.
Yes.
And is that the you read that?
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor
No
Wong.
worries.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed, carried. Yeah, I was just kind of taken aback by Councillor Thompson's remark. Yeah, I don't know if you meant it this way, Councillor Thompson, but it did come across as a criticism of staff, that they're not being rational and sensible, and I think that's quite, I took it in a very hurtful way. So if you'd like to retract it or apologize, fair enough, but I didn't think that was necessary. So.
May I speak to that?
Sure.
That was not my intention.
Good.
I'm supporting you guys, saying this is a great move. I appreciate what they're doing, and it was meant with no disrespect. I have full respect for our staff, and I'm sorry you took it that way.
Well, I'm just clarifying that because I did see some faces that were not taking it in a positive way. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. All right. Then let's move on to 7.1.
Madam Mayor, this is largely an administrative item. I'll provide you a little bit of background. The Strata Property Act requires approval by municipalities for strata subdivisions that involve previously occupied buildings. As the Rush House, which you're well aware of, was previously occupied as a single-family residence, it's subject to the Strata Property Act. Council approved the HRA for the Rush House in 2017, and that is a really good news story. It enabled the owner to create a garden suite in the basement of the Rush House and build 2 dwelling units and accessory garages on the property. The Rush House is designated as a municipal heritage resource, and just as an aside, I had the chance to go tour it last week, and I think staff are really pleased with how that's turning out as a really good example of heritage revitalization. The owner is nearing completion of the project, is requested approval of the strata plan. The HRA that you approved anticipated the lands would be subdivided under the Strata Property Act, and prior approval, why this didn't come before during the approval of the HRA, it just wasn't possible because the strata plan just did not exist at that time. So the proposed strata plan is consistent with the approved HRA, and it's our recommendation that it be approved, and we recommend that you move and approve the motion, please.
Okay, so Councillor Gambioli.
Right, oh, I think there's a question first.
Councillor Soprovich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Bailey, if this was not a heritage site, would the amount of density that's on this lot be given a go-ahead?
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Soprovich, I'm not really sure of the context, but staff would assess each application on its own merits and with your policies and make recommendations accordingly.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back to the motion.
Yep.
I will recommend I will recommend the motion as written.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And number 8, proposed respectful behavior bylaw number 4999, 2018, amendment bylaw number 5039, 2019.
The proposed respectful bylaw, behavior bylaw number 4999, 2018, amendment bylaw number 5039, 2019 be adopted.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 8.1, proposed heritage revitalization agreement bylaw number 5026, 2019, and heritage designation bylaw number 5027, 2019, 3321 Radcliffe Avenue, the Hewitt House. And I'll go to Councillor Gambioli.
So I'll make that motion again, and I note that, I'd just like to note before I read the motion that it says in small print up there at the top, the last sentence, as the public hearing has closed, council is not permitted to receive any further submissions regarding the proposed bylaws. Because email has been invented and a little button on our website exists where anyone can write an email to mayor and council and it goes to all 7 of us instantaneously, I would like it to be known that we have received several emails from people opposing this project since the public hearing was closed, and that those were all sent knowingly and intentionally to undermine this bylaw. So I just want that to be known by the public that we need to create a better system, or we need to change this bylaw because it's not working. So after having said that, I will recommend that proposed Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw number 5026, 2019 be adopted.
Okay, Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make a few comments before we had any debate. Or am I? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Gambioli first.
Oh, normally we don't have anything to say at adoption, so I had not planned anything.
Okay, so Councillor Cameron is the
I'm
second.
not going to say anything more than I don't agree with Councillor Gambioli that the emails were sent by members of the public in an attempt to intentionally circumvent our laws or to undermine adoption. So, you know, I know that emotions are very high on this issue, and that some of the neighbors are quite concerned by it. I think that if the building is built as it's designed, that it will. I'm hoping that it will prove that those concerns are not don't bear out. But I certainly don't think people are trying to undermine the process. And all that I'd say in this situation, without revealing confidences or confidential information, is that I think this process has been quite traumatic for some of the people involved, and I won't say anything more than that. And I just ask people when they're interacting with their neighbors and when these things come to council, just, I think, realize at the end of the day there's human beings involved, and that sometimes some of the things that get said and done have consequences that people maybe didn't intend. So I think we just need to try to be a little more gentle with each other. Yes, in the council chamber and also in the community. So I'll just leave it there.
Councillor Wong?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Cameron. Certainly comments or thoughts that I echo in terms of perhaps some of the emotions that were running high on this topic. I want to certainly acknowledge that I took the weekend off to think about everything that's been said, all the pressure that's been seemingly or put on me from comments that I've heard. And I fully realize that regardless of how this turns out tonight, there will be people who will be unhappy with me and other people will be happy with me. But I wanted to acknowledge that the decisions we make are difficult, and however this turns out is not a reflection of any disrespect for any of my colleagues or any of the public. You know, I hold you folks in high esteem. The things we do are hard, and so I certainly want to acknowledge the circumstances we find ourselves in, and wanted to also say that, you know, I hope that it's not taken personally, because at the end of the day, the decision that one makes, one has to be comfortable and do it for themselves, not for because somebody else wanted them to vote a certain way.
So I would just like to speak to this matter. I want to echo what Councillor Cameron said, that we're talking about real people that are affected by our decisions. We've heard on this matter from a family that's trying to do the right thing, that is trying to do what is consistent with all our policies, that we, especially obviously the councillors that were around before the election, passed last June, the OCP, and all of the protections and incentives for heritage. These people's lives are changed by our decisions, like many of our decisions, but this one in particular, because it's a resident. It is not a developer. It is a resident that they're not in the profession of trying to develop properties. They're reading our policy, and they are trying to accommodate their family to age in place. And I have been at this longer, granted, than a few of the councillors here, but I have talked to many people in this similar situation that are just trying to keep their family together. I've had people sell their houses because they couldn't afford to keep their kids close by, to have a house, wanted a coach house. I had another family in Horseshoe Bay that ended up selling because they couldn't stay in our community. They're trying to make it work, and council of the day approved a bylaw, approved an official community plan that we all stood up proudly and said, we're going to try to make your life easier. And I feel a great obligation to those people. Yes, I feel an obligation to residents, I guess, but when I really have some difficulty when I hear from residents who say, oh, I love that heritage house on the corner. I just love it. It's so beautiful, and we just want it to stay exactly the same. We don't own it, but we love having it there. But we don't want to add one more house of 1,500 square feet because there might be issues around parking. I get that if you're not developing the property, there's nothing in it for you. I get that. I totally get that. And I guess, you know, I like to think that we think a little more altruistically than always about ourselves. I live within 2 blocks of both the Vincent House and the Rush House. And I have no problem with those properties being developed. They're on my street. In fact, the Vincent House is on on Gordon. And I supported that one because I voted for it, but I also supported it as a resident. I heard from some neighbors who didn't want it, but it looks lovely, and the Rush House is just up 12th from me, so I'm close to both of these developments. But this is going to have implications, Councillor Wong. You voted to support this, and if you change your mind on this vote, you are disappointing a family. Yes, you are disappointing residents, but I would ask you to think pretty seriously before you. No, I am the chair, and I can speak to Councillor Wong. There's nothing improper. So. Anyway, I'm directing this because I can see where Councillor Wong's going, and I'm allowed to do that. I am the chair, and if anyone speaks up, I will ask you to leave. And I am serious about that. So, I've said my piece, and I will call the question, Councillor Lambert. All in favor? Opposed? And it is defeated. So we'll go on to the council procedure bylaw.
Madam Mayor.
Well, not if we defeat the first one. Council procedure bylaw number 5005, 2019, and council committee procedure bylaw number 520, 2019.
Okay.
This is Councillor Lambert.
Yes, yes, Madam Mayor. Recommend that proposed council procedure bylaw number 5005, 2019 be adopted.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And then recommend that proposed council committee procedure bylaw number 5020, 2019 be adopted.
Recorded as opposed for that first motion for the council procedure bylaw adoption.
I have you recorded as opposed. Thank you, Councillor Wong.
You're opposed to the council procedure bylaw? Sorry?
Yes.
All right.
Madam Mayor,
Councillor
it still
Lambert?
passes.
I did move the...
All right. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And proposed official community plan bylaw number 4985, 2018, amendment bylaw number 5008, 2019, zoning bylaw number 4662, 2010, amendment bylaw number 5009, 2019, housing agreement authorization bylaw number 5010, 2019, development permit 18-123, and amendment to development permit 12-084 Amica Lionsgate, Maison Senior Living. And Councillor Thompson.
I'd like to recommend that the proposed official community plan bylaw number 4985, 2018, amendment bylaw 5008, 2019 be adopted.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And I'll recommend that the proposed zoning bylaw number 4662, 2010, amendment bylaw number 5009, 2019 be adopted.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Recommend that the proposed housing agreement authorized bylaw number 510, 2019 be adopted.
All in favor?
I have a question
For who?
for Mr. Bailey.
And Madam Mayor, sorry, Councilor, oh, this bylaw wasn't the subject of the public hearing, was it, Mr. Bailey?
The development permit or the housing?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, carry on, Councilor Amber.
Just a point of clarification, where in any of these documents is there a reference to the CAC? Is it referenced in the community amenity contribution? Is it referenced in any of these documents that we're...
Mr. Pennington, just seeking some advice on that. The CAC is part of the rezoning, so in terms of information.
Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Bailey, as long as it's information that was made available to council before the close of the public hearing, or that was not regarding the bylaws that were the subject of the public hearing, then staff can provide information.
So, Madam Mayor, the CAC, the report on the CAC, and the information the CAC was provided as part of staff's council report. And staff can confirm that those conditions precedent have been met.
So in adopting these various bylaws, which does it pertain to? Any or all of them, or?
The amenity contribution generally pertains to the zoning bylaw. It's a condition of the zoning bylaw
Okay.
adoption.
Well, then, I guess I can't go back. I wanted to, just for the record, voice my objection to the zoning bylaw on the...
You can say something at the end of the voting, or, I mean, we voted
Well,
on that matter.
We voted on it, so, okay, fine.
Shall I carry on?
Mhm.
I'll recommend that the development permit 18-123.
Madam Mayor, sorry, that question is still on the floor regarding a housing agreement authorization bylaw, so you'll need to call the question before Councilor
Thank you.
Thompson continues. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
So I'll recommend that the proposed development permit 18-123, which would regulate the form and character of the proposed apartment building and landscape, be approved.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And I'll recommend that the proposed amendment to development permit 12084, which would provide for alterations to the existing seniors facility to allow for a walkway that would physically connect the buildings and provide for adjustments to existing retaining walls, surface parking, and landscape, be approved.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, so we move to the consent agenda items. Councillor Wong.
That the items be accepted.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And reports from mayor and council. Anybody want to give any reports? Councillor Cameron?
I'll just talk about two things, Madam Mayor. One was the most recent Mayor's Council meeting, and I will just say to that there was one significant item on the agenda, which was bus delays due to congestion, and there was a report from TransLink staff, which is on the TransLink website, talking about how slowing buses is a significant risk to the region. Basically, congestion. It'll be of no surprise to anyone that traffic congestion is getting worse in the region, just as ridership is going up. And what's happening is that causes uncertainty in transit bus schedules. It also means effectively if you slow down buses, you need to add additional buses to run the same frequency, which has significant costs. So there's a cost in service quality, but there's also a cost in dollars. So for approximately more than $75 million a year is lost due to bus delay, and that's going up, and that's per year, sorry, and that's going up significantly. The graph basically is a linear line up. So, you know, this is sort of the first time the TransLink staff have looked at this issue of passenger delay and bus congestion region-wide. They identified sort of the 20 worst corridors, and people here will be interested to know that the Marine Main corridor on the North Shore is one of the corridors. That the Lonsdale Avenue is one of the worst corridors, and of course, it'll be as no surprise to anyone that going across the Lionsgate Bridge and down Georgia is one of the worst corridors. So these issues will have to be addressed in order to keep buses moving. And there's a number of transit priority measures. Obviously, the community here is very sensitized to the notion of bus lanes, but there's a number of other transit priority measures that can be, in addition to bus lanes, that can be initiated and used to move buses through along their route more expeditiously. And so TransLink's going to be coming forward with some suggestions over time about how we address that issue. And then the second thing I'll speak to extremely briefly is the Zero Waste Conference that happened last week, and I've just made notes for myself here. Basically, the Zero Waste Conference was quite fascinating. There's just so much to talk about, but I guess the theme is circularity and how we need to, it's not just about recycling, it's about system change and reduction in the use of resources, and particularly plastics. So the era sort of unlimited consumption is coming to an end. The area of linear systems is coming to an end, and we need to, in a sense, separate ourselves from our systems and look at ways of creating products that have an end of life that then can be reused or repurposed or reformulated into something that can be used again. So there's many different nuances to that. There's a great deal of interesting work going on around the world, obviously in Europe in particular. And we in this region are leaders in this regard, so that's a positive message, but there's still a long way for us to go. For example, on plastics, fully 40% of the plastics we produce are single-use still, even in our fairly sort of progressive jurisdiction. That means that a bottle that you use now will 40% of them or all of the plastics will end up in the landfill and never reused again for any purpose. And that's just not going to work. At a certain point, we have to stop using new resources and just reuse the resources we have in the system. So the Zero Waste Conference, if you look it up, Google it, there's some amazing videos from presentations that are worth watching if you're interested in it. But we're doing well in the region, I think, relatively, but there's a long way to go before we're at sort of a sustainable place. So I'll just leave it at those two.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Soprovich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, you made some comments a week or so ago on traffic at this community and other parts of the North Shore. I think it would be extremely well positioned for the District of West Vancouver to make application in some form or another to the provincial and federal government to look at ways and means how we can best alleviate the ever-increasing traffic problems on the North Shore. In particular, when you, to Councillor Cameron's position on the buses being slowed down, we're going to have more buses in the future, that's for sure. But I'll give you an example, Madam Mayor. The Sea to Sky is growing exponentially, and there's no bus system coming down from, how long is it going to take before people get a clue in? How many cars would be opted out if we had a bus system coming down? I know that it's going to take some time to bring about cycling, but there's a display coming on the 8th here where we introduced a new bike pattern. These will take time. The overarching position is that when you see a growth on the Sea to Sky, ferries coming in and doubling the 10 at the wharf at the same time, movement of goods and services that seem to be escalating, not only out of West Vancouver but in. We are a flow-through community, and we have gridlock with a 3-lane bridge. The B-line was a good start, but if that's all we're going to see in the next 10 years, we're in for big trouble as far as gridlock. Something has to be done. I think West Vancouver could take a lead with help of staff and others, that we make some position and file it off to the 2 levels of government and do it as soon as later. And it might necessitate a council meeting and a discussion from all the councillors in their views and see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Soprovich. I don't see any other reports. I'll make a few brief. Do you want to go?
So it's not a really great report. I just wanted to say thank you to staff, and thank you to all of our amazing volunteers on our committees for coming out to our civic perception last week, which was really well organized and perhaps one of the best I've ever been to. Except the mayor didn't sing, which I thought had been done before, so, you know, there's room for improvement. Anyways, thank you to all the very dedicated volunteer residents in this community, many of whom have been volunteering on our committees for years, and we could not function without their expertise and their dedication. So that's why we pull off that amazing evening every year, which is a minimum, really. But it was a very enjoyable evening.
Thank you. Okay, so just to follow up on Councillor Soprovich's comments, we have sent 8 letters after UBCM. Those just went out last week, including to the Minister of Transportation. And we will be continuing to advocate to both levels of government, and I'm actually looking forward to with our new Member of Parliament, Patrick Weiler. I would like to give a little brief report because I think people were asking about InStep, and we have finalized the terms of reference for, Next Step, which is the the organization entity that will actually implement the 13 recommendations and more of InStep. So Next Step. The big news coming out of Next Step is that we are hiring with the collective funds of the 3 North Shore municipalities. We are hiring a consultant to really manage this process, and they'll be managing the website, managing a communication strategy, as well as tracking and assigning the tasks that we have set for the group. So we've set a deadline of January to hire the consultant, and then it's full steam ahead on all of the transportation initiatives coming out of that. So we're on a good path. Thank you, Councillor Soprovich, for that. I do want to mention that we formally said goodbye to the CAO of Metro, Carol Mason, on Friday after the Metro meeting, and all around just a lot of respect, admiration, and appreciation for the work that she did over her 7 years, and that really came through loud and clear from all the speeches and staff, and she was a fantastic leader, very professional, and really left the organization in such a solid position. So, but her successor is Jerry Dobrovoni, and I happen to know how to say his last name because I went to high school with him. So Jerry comes from the city of Vancouver. He was basically head of all of their engineering, roads, infrastructure. He's an engineer. He used to play professional football for 5 years. He is very progressive, very much about supporting women and a diverse workforce. He is a very humble and intelligent man, and it was actually, his appointment was also very roundly supported by all of the Metro directors because of his reputation coming from the city of Vancouver. So that's a good news story. And then I think it was Councillor Soprovich and I were the only ones from council that attended Council of Councils on October 26th in Surrey. And just a really good overview of all of the initiatives going on at council. And I would encourage other councillors that aren't familiar with Metro to attend the Council of Councils if you get a chance. I don't know if we've had any since. Oh, yeah, you did attend there. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, you were there. Anyway, very informational and very big organization with a lot of complexity. So those are my reports.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion?
Motion. Oral reports from Mayor and Council be received for information.
All righty. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we get our public question period, and we've got Caroline Reynolds.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just have a couple of questions. And the first was, I might have misheard, but I thought you said that the West Vancouver United Church ceremony was this Sunday, and then you said November 17th. So I found it a bit confusing. I think you meant November.
I did mean November 17th.
So I thought it should be clear to put that out. I would like to thank, the civic reception was marvelous. Thank you very much for what it is. But I do have a question. It was a little hard to hear, but I know it's very difficult being on council making decisions, and this has been quite a difficult year. But I was quite concerned. There has been a motion that you've put on about behavior and being respectful for the rest, and obviously we all agree with that. One thing I could not follow or understand, and I do think you're all trying very hard, and I commend you for that, but Madam Mayor, I possibly didn't hear it all, but I got the impression that in one of the adoption missions, you were speaking to one of the councillors, Councillor Wong, and it sounded as if, I might be wrong, but I think we need clarification on this, that you were warning him about if he did something, it would be something or other. And so I think we have to look into it, because I didn't hear properly. But I was absolutely, I mean, you're doing a good job, the mayor update's good, and you're having coffee, and so please don't get me wrong. But I couldn't believe I heard that you were trying to chastise. It almost sounded like another councillor. So I think that whatever it is, I respect all of you and what you're doing. And if you're going to put out rules for the behavior of public and council, which I agree with, I think perhaps there should be discussion on how far you could go in telling someone else that they shouldn't be speaking in a certain way, or if they do something, it'll be what I just didn't hear it. There were so many people around me disapproving. I really couldn't hear it. So I just wanted to warn you that that might be taken the wrong way, and there should perhaps be a guideline on that. So thank you very much for everyone for your efforts, and the civic reception was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. If you didn't hear it, I was not warning Councillor Wong. We were in debate, and in debate, that's what debate is. You debate with your colleagues. And I was suggesting that if Councillor Wong was going to change his vote, that he consider that seriously. So, because it was going to have impacts. I think that was almost, I'll look at the tape, but that was exactly what I said.
Oh, I don't think anybody.
Caroline,
I don't think anybody would be upset if you were saying to consider it seriously. So that was not the point.
Yeah.
So thank you for looking into it.
Yes, I will. Thank you. All right. So, moving on to the adjournment. All in favor?
That was supposed to be my moment.
Why? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.